Welcome to She Sells Radio. I have to tell you, I am so excited for our conversation today because if you heard episode 142 with Mark Magnacca, the CEO of Allego, you heard him rave about our guest today when I asked him about what was a really standout sales experience that you had recently. And when he described the sales experience and what it was like working with our guest, I knew I had to get her on the show to just share her magic and share how she does this. So my guest today is Catherine Tindall. She's a CPA and a partner at Dominion Enterprise Services, which is a concierge tax advisory practice. And she works with very successful entrepreneurs, with small business owners, to reduce their overall tax burden, which I think could be a very fascinating topic in and of itself. But what I really want to dive in today is to learn more about this incredible customer experience that my friend Mark raved about and how we can implement just some of her, like I said, magic and strategies in our own client experience. So Catherine, welcome to She Sells Radio. I'm so happy to have you.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And we were talking in the pre-chat, and when we got connected through Mark, we also bonded on we're both moms of little ones. Tyler's your daughter. Alice is 13 months, right?
Yeah, it's going by really fast.
Oh my gosh. I'm just curious, what's the biggest thing that shifted for you since having her in terms of how you think about your business and then also just life in general?
I think it's funny. It's kind of in the opposite direction. I realized a lot of the things that I was doing in my business, because my mind is very systems oriented, that I realized when I had her that I kind of had to treat that relationship in a similar way. It's like, we have to have processes, we have to have, systems set up for how things are going to be done, just so that, I can actually get something done, because, as you know, with a little one, it can become a full-time production pretty quickly if you don't have good help in place and, good boundaries with different things. So.
Oh my gosh. It's so true. And I love that you said that too, Catherine, because I remember for me, it was probably the first 6 to 8 months after we had our little one, Jack. I was flying by the seat of my pants, and it was a mess. And I mean, it was good in many ways, and it was also very stressful and chaotic. And I kind of had this wake up one day of there's systems that run the business. There's systems that streamline everything on that front. I'm treating this like I'm just flying by the seat of my pants. Why couldn't I do the same for this? And so everything, we got a project management board set up in the software I use for my company. I'm not even kidding. Like, you may do something similar. I don't know, but like everything got systematized, and it was something like, and you can be present. It frees you up to be present with your little one. And this is teeing up perfectly to what I want to talk with you about today on the episode too, because I know you do this so brilliantly and so beautifully with your clients. So that actually worked out really well for an answer. So thank you. But I am so curious. I'm so excited to get into the topic at hand. Before we do though, I just would love if you could give us some context on your background, what got you into the space that you're in, and then we'll start there and we'll take it from there. Let's start there.
Yeah. So basically I'm a CPA. So I'm a certified public accountant. I've always been in tax professionally. And I always, through the years, I worked for other CPA firms, but I always had my eye on, I wanted to have my own practice. And a big part of that was because the kind of things that I wanted to do with the practice are kind of atypical for the industry. I had more of an interest in doing things more out of the box when it comes to planning and client relationships, and really retooling the model of how a CPA tax practice works. And so I decided a couple of years ago that the timing was right, and so I founded the current company I'm with, Dominion Enterprise Services. And we're kind of a mix of a tax advisory practice, and then we also do like specialty tax credits. So a lot of like the COVID tax credits that are out there right now is another part of what we do. But I really wanted to turn the firm into something that was much more process oriented, much more systems oriented, because I always noticed it in other practices, the kind of bottlenecks and hiccups in the client relationship were things that we could fix, but it was always, hair on fire, trying to get through deadlines instead of looking at, our systems overall, be it like the sales cycle or the production cycle, how to really make these things streamlined so that the client has a really good experience. And then we also have a really good experience.
Yeah. Mm. That's so powerful. And I love how you said, just thinking outside the box and looking at what needs to shift in the mold. And I think,
Yeah.
I know we're kind of getting to know each other here. A lot of my background is like I've done door-to-door sales. I've done the old, like I've sold yellow pages back in the day, like really throwback. And there's a lot of organizations that have created very innovative sales processes. And there's also a lot of stuff that's out there that I find is very outdated still. And it's like little things we can do that make the experience so much better, both externally and internally. So tell us about, I think we should just dive right in, because when I had Mark on the show, I said, tell me about, a great sales experience you've had recently. He's like, you got to hold on and see this. And this is episode, I think it was 142 for anyone who wants to go back and watch the video, because he goes and he steps away from his desk and he comes back and he's like, look at this. And it was like, he was holding like he was so excited by it. I think it was a letter that you had written to him to prepare for a conversation, maybe even just give us some context of this and how you do this with your prospective customers. Cause I think he was excited. I was excited, and we want to learn more.
Yeah. So I think basically one of the things early on that I realized when I started my own firm was that I had never been, trained in sales, and that it's its own discipline. So I came into it with, very technical mindset. I'd always worked well with clients and helping them through their situations, but selling is just a very different discipline than that. Building rapport with people, understanding personality types, all of those kinds of things were things that I just wasn't even aware of until I really got into a sales role and realized, hey, I need to get some training. I need to learn how to do this, because it's just a different discipline than what I've been trained and taught in school and through my professional experience. And so I went and had some coaching and sales training, and specifically for people that are in my industry. And one of the things that they talked about was you really have to have a system in place for how you're going to interact with people, because it's when you're in the kind of role that I am, it's not somebody buying a product, right? It's a very high trust decision for people, because it's something so technical, they can't really make the choice themselves. It's like with a doctor, right? A doctor will give you medical advice and you kind of just have to trust them. You can do some of your own research, but ultimately when it comes down to it, part of what you're paying for is the, trust in that relationship. And so I think for me, I thought, okay, as part of the sales process, that's really the big thing that I'm trying to do, is show people that I'm a trustworthy person, and that the where my services come from and like why I do what I do is from a sense of wanting to serve other people and for their well-being. So I originally wanted to get into medicine, was my original dream, but I ended up switching to tax, because I realized that, some of the control things that I wanted to have were going to be much harder to achieve in medicine than, having a tax practice, where I almost feel like, I help people just as much, because there's so much fear and anxiety that goes on around it.
For sure. It's it can be one of the most daunting things you ever deal with.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes,
yeah.
For sure. And so for me, I thought, there's so much digital noise that goes on out there, that one of the things I really make as part of my practice is that when I'm interacting with anyone, I treat it as it's going to be a lifelong relationship. And also, so that's why I do things like handwritten cards. And, I have this little book that I love that's called the Rohn Treasury of Quotes, that I found out about from another mentor. And so I send those to people, because it's just really just like little entrepreneur pick-me-ups, because it's like little quotes. So it's those kinds of touches are the things that, I've decided that I wanted to do those things, and then have systems so that they get executed, pretty much every time.
Sure. And I'd love if I think this would be so fascinating. And
Mhm.
obviously you've got things that you do that are proprietary, and that's great. And we honor that. And however much you can share of like both, I think if we could break it down by on the front end, on the sales process, what are some of the systems that you put into place and start there? And then on the back end from customer experience, because I know one of the things I keep reading about you in the testimonials is even, after someone's become your customer, the customer experience is exceptional, and how we can use technology and automate some of these touch points as well. So on the front end, what are some of the things that you do that I know you said you do the handwritten note, but that's on the front end, right? Before someone
Mhm.
has had a conversation with you. Is
Mhm.
that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So usually when somebody initially gets in contact with me, the first thing that happens is my assistant will go in and pull up anything that she can on the person and
Mm,
save it to a contact file just so I can review it before I talk to the person. Um, and then one of the other things that I do that is a little different as well is whenever I talk to people, prospects or other referral partners, I always take call notes and then send them the call notes after the call so that I
mm,
also have it for my record, but then it shows them that I was really listening to them because I was taking notes the whole time. And so those are some of the pieces. And I maintain everything through, it's kind of like a hybrid CRM workflow software that's designed for accountants, but I think
mm,
it's actually would be useful for a lot of people in a lot of different applications. It's called Carbon with a K. So I
mm,
use that, but I think part of it more than just, okay, what's the technology involved? It's really the mental work of engineering how you want things to go and then just
mm.
implementing them to work with the technology that you have. Um, that's what I've found to be you know, the key thing. It's really that mind work that you do designing out a system and then finding the play, like how you're going to execute it, whether it be technology or other people that help you in the process, because I've got a couple assistants that help me with a lot of
Mm.
my outreach work, and they help me with mailings and that sort of thing. um, but we've developed systems to make it efficient and able to be executed.
This is so good. And I love this. And I know that so many of our listeners love this too, because my, and we may be wired the same way. Like you're very much like you've said, like systems oriented, like your brain thinks this way naturally.
Yeah.
Mine, it takes a little bit of an oomph to get there. It's not that I'm kind of like, let's just meet, let's connect, let's, vibe off of each other. But when you have a great system in place, it empowers you to do that
Hmm.
so much more effortlessly, because you're not getting caught up in, did I follow up with this person? Did I lose that contact? Yada, yada. So it's very empowering to have this in place. And I want to
Hmm.
pause on what you said about, I want to think through, how do I want this to go? So are you kind of
Yeah.
saying like, if I could have my perfect customer interaction
Hmm.
on the front end, like what would happen? What would be the touch points? And then how can we systematize it? How can we make it better? How can we elevate it? So just taking the time to really map that
Hmm.
out.
Yep.
I feel like I want like a whiteboard, right? I want to start thinking through this. You're getting me so, so like jazzed up about this. I want to do this for us now. So that would be a great takeaway for everyone right away. And a great action item is to
Hmm.
sit and just map out what is our perfect client experience on the front end. And then I'm assuming you've done this on the back end
Yep.
too.
Yeah.
Gosh, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
And that was the thing I think that helped me with that was coming from that technical background of the tax work. There are so many little steps that go
Mm,
into dealing with someone's tax situation, with filing the returns, and which payment's going to come out of which bank account and what's going to be the timing. And there's so many little pieces that we're always having to track and tick and tie, that I realized, oh, my sales process should behave the same way. It should be something where I treat it as if it's a work item, as if it's a tax return, or a tax credit, where we're going to, here are the steps that we have to do every time. And here are the things I need to make sure are always buttoned up, so that it's just a consistent experience for people, and that they've, they've had everything that they need in order to kind of move along through the process, in a human way. So a lot of like what goes on in sales, it really is that trying to not pre-engineer deep connections, but it's to really make sure that you are getting there and doing the things that are going to get you there.
And I love what you said too about, getting the client file, doing the review on them ahead of time. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on, I'd love to hear what sort of reactions you get from people, because I think one of the little things we can do, to your point of there's so much digital noise and there's so much noise in general, is like, if you just make people feel seen and make them feel like they matter, that in my experience is maybe 90% of it. I mean, it goes a long way. What sort of feedback and reactions do you get from people with those little extra touches?
Oh, just mountains of positive feedback.
Yeah.
So I keep doing it.
Mm,
But I think part of it too is, it just depends on what kind of, like product you're working with and what you're selling. And I think for us, because the product really is the relationship and the service, that's why I think it's so important for us to do those pieces. I know for some people, if they do really high volume or, something where you're not going to be talking to the person, it's like a one-time sale kind of a thing. It's harder to get to that level versus, for most people, once they change who their tax practitioner is, that's a relationship that goes for like 10 years. So it's important I've found it's important to tee that relationship up with, those personal touches and really putting the effort in.
And for some context for everyone, what's the average length of the sales cycle in your space?
It really depends on what they're looking for us to do, because our firm is kind of split between, we do a lot of tax planning work, and those tend to be long-term relationships. And then on the other side, we do a lot of tax credit work. So on the credit work side, our sales cycle is very short. It can be, 10 days, 7 days. On the tax planning side, it tends to be a lot longer, because one of the things that I do as part of that sales process is I do a deep dive into what's going on in their situation to make sure that I'm going to be a profit center for them. Because I don't want to go into that relationship not knowing that I'm going to be able to deliver what I promise. So I really take the time to look through what they've got going on. And, my discovery call is usually like an hour long, where we really get into the tall grass, because I want to understand what their goals are and really make sure that I can do for them, that I can do what I promise. And that also I'm the right fit, because a lot of times I'm just not going to be the right fit for people. And so I try to help them get with another tax professional that's going to be the right fit for what they've got going on.
Yeah. And your mindset there it's everything that we teach in the She Sells world of just truly being of service. And I think there's a lot of lip service given to that sometimes. And then there's people like you who like really actually do that. So I appreciate that. And so given that longer sales cycle, I know, and I like to get into the details of this stuff, because I think it's so important. And this is so helpful. So thank you. With that longer cycle, I would imagine, so you've got like right off the bat, you're making a great impression with the handwritten note and the quote. But then for people who, for whatever reason, it's a longer follow-up, do you have touch points? You've got a system for touch points scheduled every month, every couple weeks, like anything that you can share with that, and what some of your better, like longer term follow-up touch points are, that would be, I think, amazing to hear about.
Yeah. So for a lot of people who, either get referred into me where they're not quite ready for tax planning, I talk them through their situation, and it's more often I get people that want to start working with me, and I say, you know what, the timing's not quite right yet. Your income's just not there, or there's just not enough that I can do yet based on what your situation is. And so I say to people, okay, let's follow up. I think you'll be ready for me to reassess you in 6 months. Do you want to do that? And then I put something on the calendar where I'm going to follow back up with them again. And that's usually what I leave it at with people, because the thing with income tax is it really, it's, you do it once a year when you file your tax returns, but it's really something that, is going on all the time, because it's how you behave. is how you get taxed. And so to say, okay, if you're going to be buying a bunch of properties this summer, let's talk in May. Let's see what's going on with that and see if that's the right time for us to do some more strategy work for you. Or, most of the time people know kind of that full length of what's going on. And I tell them, if you're going to start materially changing what you're doing this way or the other, then we need to talk beforehand, because if you execute this without planning, it's going to become very expensive for you on the tax side.
Yeah.
So that's usually what I do on the follow-up side is I always try to make sure that whatever the next step is going to be, whether it's me getting them connected with another tax professional or me following up with them again, in a couple months when the timing's going to be better, just based on what their situation is, that's always, clarified and then, put on the calendar. And part of it is I track these prospect relationships as if it's a work item. So it'll just show up in, kind of my unfinished business section of things, unless I, say, okay, next steps are I'm going to move this work item to April and we're going to readdress this prospect. Or next step is they're not a good fit. I'm going to send them to another tax professional. And so I'll mark the job as completed and keep call notes. And so if they come back to me again, I'll have the full history of what we had previously talked about. And that's usually how I handle those.
This is so good. And that one little thing of just put it in the calendar, whatever the next step is, that I didn't do that for so long. And then I had a mentor teach me that several years ago. It was like, it makes all the difference in the world. Just put it. So you do that for pretty much everything. It just, if it needs to get done, it goes in the calendar. Oh,
yeah.
I love that. I love that.
And I do a lot of time blocking too, which is a really helpful technique. Basically anything that's going to take me more than a half hour to do, it lives on my calendar time blocked, so that I always, when I log into my computer the next day, I know what I'm working on for the full day and like when I need to work on it. So I actually get all my things done.
So good. Yeah, it's so good. What a satisfying feeling too, right?
Yes.
At the end of the day. So this is, I love this. I'm getting just so inspired for how we can tighten up what we do in my business. And the one other piece I want to ask you about, Catherine, is, so someone comes in, they have that great discovery, they feel seen, they decide that you decide they're a good fit for you, you move forward. Anything that you want to share on the back end of that, on the customer experience side, about how you keep that energy going and how you continue to deliver that exceptional experience after someone has said yes? We'd love to hear.
Yeah. So one of the things we do when people come into the firm for the tax planning work is we do an onboarding call, which I think is really helpful. And then we have a full onboarding guide that basically explains to the client, okay, now you're a client. This is how things work in the firm. These are our expectations. And this is something that I talk through them with in the discovery call too, is, if we were to become your accounting firm, what would your expectations be of us? And then once they answer that question, I flip it back onto them and say, okay, if you were to become a client, here's my expectations of you. Like when we ask for documents, we need them when we ask for them, and those sorts of things. But so we do an onboarding call after someone becomes a client that we just kind of go through a lot of the things, like how do you log into the portals that we use, and what are deadlines for certain document submissions, and what's the best way to get in touch with us? How do you submit a ticket? All those kinds of things. And we just do a full long meeting and just get all the loose ends wrapped up. But I think on the ongoing point, one of the things that I do as well is for most of the clients where they're going to be the long-term planning clients, we do I have a separate work item that's called monthly touch. And so it'll ping me, once a month to say like, hey, have you talked to Mark in a while? And then I can look on Mark's contact and say, oh no, we haven't talked in like a month. I'm just going to send him a quick email to see how he's doing. Or, I know he was like working on this one project or, buying this property or whatever it was. I should send him an email and see how that's going, or we should do a quick phone call and, 5-minute phone call to just catch up and see how he's doing. And so I have that just like it pre-populates on my calendar when somebody becomes a new client. Part of the onboarding on our side is I set up those little reminders to say, okay, you need to make sure that I've at least had contact with people, once a month. because sometimes they'll have things going on and they don't realize, oh, that's going to have a tax effect. And then
Yeah.
I
Oh,
should have
yeah.
talked to my CPA about it. Um,
I've never done that.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm, wow. This is so, so, so powerful. Gosh. I'm going to have one of my team members listen to this too, to think about how we can shift things. So yeah, thank you so much and let me just ask too, before we wrap and you tell people where they can connect with you, anything else that you feel like is a needle mover in terms of systems, client experience, like anything I just feel like I don't even know what to ask because you've got so many things, so many ninja things, and I don't want to miss anything. So, is there anything else that you feel like is a real needle mover that I haven't asked you about that you think would be important for our listeners to know?
I think the biggest needle mover for me overall was realizing that I needed help and seeking help with it.
Mm.
Because I was coming from a very technician in tax practitioner world background. And so to realize, oh no, sales is a really different discipline and I'm not going to try to DIY this.
Yeah.
I need to get some formal training. I need to get some education. And I need to have somebody who's experienced really going into the weeds with me on my particular operation to make sure that this thing is great. So I worked with a sales coach and, a coaching program, particularly for, how I do my sales process, how I do my client onboarding, all of those things. And I just found that to be invaluable because one of the biggest things I've learned on my entrepreneur journey is don't DIY stuff. It's going to take you forever. Do the things that you're really good at and sub out everything else because you're just not going to make any progress if you're just trying to DIY everything.
So true.
And it's as true for, I think people think, oh, sales, that's just talking to people. And it's just so much more than that. So
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit more than that.
a little bit more than that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Catherine, thank you for sharing so generously what you do, your processes. And what I love about this is regardless of the industry. And even if you're not an entrepreneur, but you're in sales, I know when I was in sales working for other people, I treated it as if it was my own business, which I think is part of what
Yeah.
created the success there. But you can, like, if you want to succeed, implement these things regardless of whether you own your own company or not. So
Yep.
tell everyone, Catherine, where can they connect more with you? Where can they get to know more about your company? If they want to have a consult or maybe connect with you on LinkedIn, what are the best ways to go from here?
Yeah. So the best ways to get in touch with us, if you visit our website, that has a lot more resources on the work we do. Like I mentioned, part of our practice is with the planning for entrepreneurs, but the lion's share of our practice currently is doing COVID tax credits for companies who had employees. So I encourage you, if you haven't gotten formally assessed, it's something well worth checking out because we're seeing companies save well over six figures with some of these COVID tax credits that are still available. So I encourage people to, I have a bunch of resources on my website where you can learn more about what's still out there. But that's a good way to get in touch. And then also on LinkedIn, I'm fairly active on there as well. And always am posting little things. So those are two good ways to kind of get connected.
So good. And we'll link both your LinkedIn as well as your website in the show notes too. So I'm so thrilled that I asked Mark that question and that he brought you up because this has just been such an enlightening and such an exciting conversation to think about how we can make these small adjustments that make all the difference for a client experience standpoint, for us as business owners or sales professionals. So thank you, Catherine, so much for your time and just for leading the way in this space. This is so powerful.
Oh, thank you so much, Elise. It was an absolute pleasure. I always enjoy, anything that I can do to help somebody else. I'm always grateful for that.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, we're so grateful to have you, and for you, my listener, please go out, connect with Catherine, check out her website, check out the way she structures things too. I know there's a lot of intention behind that too for customer experience. So you'll learn so much just from seeing how she's done that. And Please, when you're listening, take a screenshot, tag Catherine on LinkedIn, tag me, let us know what your biggest takeaway was, and let's give her some love for this awesome conversation and for sharing so generously. So until next week, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you on our next episode of She Sells Radio. Bye for now.